more music at the end, during which we can sit quietly. So I'm going to skip over our moment of silent meditation to give enough time to Carrie for her presentation. We had a little extra stuff going on this morning, so I'm going to save a little time. So we'll move on to our reading, which is a poem called Pandemic, and it will be read by Erica, who found the poem for us. Erica?
Actually, Linda found this for us. This is by the Reverend Lynn Unger. The title is Pandemic. What if you thought of it as the Jews consider the Sabbath, the most sacred of times? Cease from travel, cease from buying and selling. Give up just for now on trying to make the world different than it is. Sing, pray, touch only those to whom you commit your life. Center down. And when your body has become still, reach out with your heart. Know that we are connected in ways that are terrifying and beautiful. You could hardly deny it now. Know that our lives are in one another's hands. Surely that has become clear. Do not reach out your hands. Reach out your heart. Reach out your words. Reach out all the tendrils of compassion that move invisibly where we cannot touch. Promise the world your love, for better or for worse, in sickness and in health, so long as we all shall live.
Thank you, Erica. And now we'll hear from Carrie. I'm guessing you all remember all that you know about Carrie, but I'm going to tell you again that we're so happy to have her here. She is a retired jail chaplain, a former parish staff member, community volunteer, of course, and facilitator of a house church. She loves to travel, read, and laugh. She's been happily married to Bob for 43 years. And she's going to share today some of the books that have lit her way along her path. Thank you, Carrie, and welcome.
Thanks, Jenny. Before we get going, I want to speak a little bit about my Scandinavian heritage. I'm guessing that you know, because so often it's been said that Denmark is the happiest country in the world, or one of the happiest countries in the world. And that is because the Danish people have what they call hygge. The first book on your list of things that you're going to see is the little book of hygge. And what hygge is just settling in, hunkering down with simple things. So if you could be right here with me, you'd see I got my favorite old ratty sweater on. I'm in sweatpants. I've got my mug of something warm. I've got a candle lit. You need candles. It smells like roses. I think in this particular time, we need to do all we can to help ourselves find that contentment and happiness in the simple things. So I urge you and encourage you. It's what, 10:30 or so? So this is warm now. It might be wine later on this afternoon, but be good and gentle and kind to yourselves. And I can't think of anything better to do while I'm hunkered in than to read a book and listen to some music. So now I'm going to share with you some of the books that I've chosen that talk about spirituality for me. When I was a little kid, I lived out in the country, and I spent as much time as I could as possible outside. And there weren't many little kids like me in the neighborhood, so I spent a lot of that time by myself. I was down by the creek or down by the river or in the cow pasture, and I was way connected to nature. I caught frogs and fish, and I picked wildflowers and climbed trees, and woven through all of that was just a natural awareness of my connection to the divine. Somehow I got captured and put on a school bus, and I got taken to a Catholic grade school. And in my Catholic grade school, I got taught about God, the Father Almighty, who sent his only son, Jesus, to die for me, for my sins, so that I could live together with them forever in heaven someday. Now, I know that's very simplistic, but that's what I was absorbing. And I tried very hard to find a deep connection to that Father Almighty and that Son. But it was so much easier for me to find God outside of my religious tradition, literally outside. As I grew older, I chafed at that predominant image of an almighty male God, ruler of the world, unmovable and unchangeable and omnipotent. And I was horrified at the thought of a father who would send his son to death rather than take care of his own business. I was so steeped in traditional Catholic Christian theology, and it wasn't making any sense to me. I had inklings of other ways to think about God, but no words with which to express them. And then one day, I came upon Elizabeth Johnson, a Benedictine sister, and she changed my life in her book, She Who Is. In She Who Is, Elizabeth asserts that, quote, and she speaks in big words and it's tough reading, but if you stick with it, it's wonderful. She says that the symbol of God functions, neither abstract in content nor neutral in its effect. Speaking about God sums up, unifies, and expresses a faith community's sense of the ultimate mystery. The worldview and expectation of order devolving from this, and the concomitant orientation of human life and devotion, which, if I put that into my own words, basically says, show me your image of God and I will tell you your theology. She goes on to remind us that any language about God is metaphorical because we simply cannot capture the essence of the divine in any kind of words and statements. Unfortunately for us, most of the metaphorical names for God in the scriptures are male, like Father and King. And somehow those metaphors have gotten literalized, and they serve to make God, for many people, a king who rules over heaven and earth with supreme power and judgment. And that image of God as a ruling male also then undergirds our patriarchy and the subjugation of women. And another insight that Elizabeth has is that when the prevailing image of God does not keep up with reality, that God diminishes and finally just fades away, which is what happened to me. Her book is filled with insights gleaned from a feminist reading of scripture, and they allow for a fresh and all-encompassing image of God as spirit, Sophia, divine energy that calls all of creation to join her in her works of renewal, justice, and relationship. As I said, it's a really academic read, but if you can hang with it, it is amazingly enlightening. So being able to reimagine God and to connect God to Spirit and Sophia, which I realize now is what I was doing way back when down by the creek, was the biggest breakthrough in my spiritual growth. And I wondered if there was a way to reimagine and connect with Jesus as well. And in the next book, Jesus, Uncovering the Life, Teachings, and Relevance of a Religious Revolutionary, Marcus Borg helped me to do that. His book is much easier reading than She Who Is, and he offers a whole new way to understand Jesus. What he says is that when we speak of Jesus, we're drawing from two different perspectives of him: the historical, pre-Easter Jesus, and the post-Easter Jesus of the Gospels. Now, there really aren't many identifiable, historical, verifiable facts about Jesus, other that he lived in Palestine in the 1st century, and he was crucified under the authority of the governing Roman officials. The bulk of information we have about Jesus comes from the Gospels, and the Gospels were written the earliest ones 30 years after Jesus died. So those gospel writers had the advantage of looking at Jesus's life through the creed that was developing about him and inserting into his life story seeds of Christian tradition. That's the Jesus I can't identify with. But then he goes on to talk about what he believes is true of the historical Jesus. First of all, he was a spirit person who experiences the sacred frequently and vividly, and who mediates the sacred by becoming a conduit for the power or wisdom of God to enter the world. Second, he was a healer, and we see all sorts of those healing stories in the gospel. Third, he was a wisdom teacher, and he spoke in parables and stories about an alternative wisdom coming out of his own experience of the sacred. Fourth, he was a social prophet, challenging the marginalizing and oppressive purity system and all the other unjust social structures of his time, and demanding that they be replaced by a politics of compassion. So he rattled the social cage, and that got him into deep trouble with the ruling Jewish elite and the Roman authorities that they cooperated with. And that most probably led to his crucifixion as a dangerous rebel. Finally, he was a movement initiator. He didn't come to start a new religion or to deny Judaism, but to renew and revitalize it, to restore its purpose, and to be a light for the nations. I'm so grateful to Marcus Borg for opening my eyes to see this pre-Easter Jesus with whom I can truly be connected. I can't call myself a Christian, basically because that term for me has been so corrupted by people who use it to discriminate and to bully. But I can say that I try to live as Jesus modeled. And the next book on my list is truly what I believe followers of Jesus are called to do. The next book, and I believe, Jim, you're going to be sharing that whole list in a minute on the chat, right?
Yes, it's in the chat right now.
Okay, excellent. Thank you.
And people just have to click on it and it will open up a Word document.
Perfect.
Okay.
So this book is called The Time Is Now, a call to uncommon courage by another Benedictine sister. I guess I really resonate with some of the things that nuns have to say, but Joan Chittister. Joan is a wisdom figure for me today in the realm of religion and spirituality. You can see her on Super Soul Sunday. She's one of Oprah's favorites right now as well. But in her latest book, she raises her concerns about the selfishness, the power plays, the narcissism, the violence, the lies, the prejudice of politicians and citizens who have seized this moment to take America on what they perceive to be a path of glory. And she turns to the prophets who in their times sought to usher in a brand new day of justice, freedom, peace, and transformation. She calls us to be prophets. The time is now to uncover our uncommon courage. She says that Jesus was a prophet who encouraged acceptance of others and called people to co-creation, to work on justice and peace together. And here's a quote from her. Prophetic spirituality calls us to walk in the wake of the biblical prophets of ancient Israel, to hear the word of God for the world and repeat it, shout it, model it until the world comes awake. It is to demand it until the hungry are fed and the sick are cared for and the violent are sent away empty of their power to destroy. In my words, we are called to speak and live the truth even when it costs us, even when no one seems to listen. And we need to speak it in ways that can be heard and in ways that encourage others to join us in working for justice. She goes on to say that there are 4 things that we need to have in order to be able to live prophetically. And I think these are so important in all of our lives. The first thing we need is a connection to the divine. The second thing we need is a tribe of people, someone who understands us and has our back. And when I'm looking at all these little rectangles on the screen today, I see here a tribe. I see here people who are supporting each other, people who are wanting to work together to bring about what you believe in. The third thing she says that we need is an ability to step back, take a breath. There's only so much we can do. And to be able to, like Jesus did, go off by ourselves, refresh, recharge, let it go for a bit. And the fourth thing we need is a sense of humor, to be able to laugh, to be able to see the craziness in life and be able to laugh at it. I've been reading Joan's book over and over for the past 6 months. First of all, making sure I have those foundations. And then also, in light of pre-corona, thinking about ways in which I believe we are called to help redirect the way our ship is going right now. I think it's even more essential reading now that corona is here, because I think that we are going to need to be very prophetic people committed to justice as we rebuild what our world looks like after corona. So I've made peace with my Catholic tradition with the help of these people, keeping some of it and moving on from that which doesn't serve. And I'm always on the lookout for theologians and writers who can challenge me and help me grow. And the first little introduction I had to UU theology, oh gosh, it's got to be 15 years ago now, is through Forest Church. And my favorite book of his is The Cathedral in the World. He thinks about lots of stuff in that book, the meanings of faith, God, religion in troubled times. And he challenges us to see the light shining through the many windows of the Cathedral of the World. I love his little image, his image of, can you picture yourself sitting in a big cathedral, beautiful stained glass, and the light is shining through that glass, and there's a little piece on Bonnie's nose of light, and there's a little piece on Linda's ear of light, and there's a little piece on Jim's beard of light, and there's a little piece on Kathy's glasses of light, and I have a little piece maybe right here, and all these little pieces are our own personal truths about that light that's being fragmented and coming in. But my piece isn't any more true than yours or important than yours. But if we can combine our pieces, if we can share them and massage them and speak them, we have a whole much bigger and broader expansion of this little piece of truth that I have. One of the things I love that he says in his book is this. It's a quote. "We sit on a single grain of sand on this vast cosmic beach and argue over who has the goods on God. Is it the atheist or the theist, the Hindu or the Buddhist, the Catholic or the Protestant, the Muslim or the Jew? We duel sometimes to the death over which religious teacher has the best insider information on God and the afterlife. Is it Jesus, the Buddha, Muhammad? How about Nietzsche, Gandhi, or Freud? Billions of accidents conspired to give each of these compelling teachers the opportunity even to teach. Knowing this doesn't strip me of my faith. It inspires my faith. It makes me humble. It fills me with awe. I may not believe as Jesus did, but I should dearly hope to love as Jesus did, to forgive and embrace others as unconditionally as he. That said, all quite probably Christian influenced background, my evolution continues. And I find myself drawn again to the spirituality of spirit, like Elizabeth Johnson talked about, Spirit, Sophia, God, and the spirituality of those who live close to the earth, particularly the Native American people. The next 3 books, the trilogy by Kent Nerburn, speaks directly to my soul. And I can't begin to convey the awesomeness of these books. They are funny, they're sad, they are deeply spiritual, they are entertaining, they are thought-provoking. Well, you can probably tell I'm going to be recommending the first one that would be part of the book club that Jim was talking about, but I'll try to give you a little flavor of each one. Mr. Nerburn lives in Minnesota. He is a white person. He is not Native, but he's been deeply involved in Native American issues and education. And so in the first book, Neither Wolf Nor Dog, it's a chronicle of his encounters with Dan. Dan is a Lakota elder, and Dan tells it like it is. There's no BS, for lack of a better term, in Dan. He's not happy with white people who glom on to Native rituals and customs. And he's not happy to be sought out as an elder. He makes Nerburn work really hard to earn access to his wisdom. He sums up what whites can learn from Indians very simply. Live close to the earth, get rid of some of your things, help each other, talk to the Creator, be quiet more, listen to the earth instead of building things on it all the time, don't blame other people for your troubles, and don't try to make people into something they're not. It's a funny story and a deep story about how those truths get conveyed. Nerburn goes back home and he doesn't see Dan for a while. And then in the second book, The Wolf at Twilight, Dan is almost 90 years old. And he calls Nerburn to help him bury Fatback. Fatback is his Labrador retriever who was like his best friend. And I don't remember exactly how or when Fatback died, but Fatback is in the freezer. And he calls Nerburn to come and take the journey to bury Fatback. Well, after that's done, then Dan asks Nerburn to join him for another important mission. Way back, like 80 years ago, Dan had a little sister whose name was Yellowbird. She was mute. And she was taken from one of the reservation boarding schools, and he doesn't know what happened to her. And listening to Dan's memories of what it was like in those schools, it's just horrendous. It's horrendous. But eventually, there's this dog that comes along. His name is Charles Bronson. Charles Bronson helps Nerburn find Yellowbird's grave, and Dan can grieve her properly and end a horrific chapter in his life. And there's more wisdom that Dan gifts Nerburn with. We must stop looking at life as if we humans are at the top of everything. There's spirit in everything, not just in people. If the Creator made it, there's spirit in it. And if it has spirit in it, it has a part to play in creation. The final book actually focuses deeply on spirit. It's been a long time again. Nurburn doesn't even know if Dan is still alive, but he is haunted all of a sudden by very, very, very vivid dreams of Yellowbird, Dan's little sister. And he reaches out to an Ojibwe elder who tells him that dreams let your spirit journey without your body. And he doesn't know what to make of these dreams, and he thinks he needs to reestablish contact with Dan, who has basically kind of disappeared. But he finally finds Dan, and Dan is teaching and mentoring little Z, who's very much like Yellowbird was. She's probably got epilepsy. She's got some kind of seizure disorder. And in that culture and in Dan's wisdom, he believes that she's a spirit person, that her heart is pure, that she can talk to birds, she can hear the old voices, and that somehow she's going to be a voice of hope for people in the time of darkness. It's awesome. I can't, like I said, I don't have the words to tell you how good this trilogy is. But the last lessons that we learn from the trilogy are pretty amazing. Dan says we need to pay more attention to dreams and to the messages they have for us. In the realm of spirit, everything is training. One of the challenges of life is to make a home for spirit power. Everything is alive and part of Mother Earth. Everything is about connections, and we are meant to explore the ways in which everything fits with everything else. We can all learn more from listening than talking. And everything that shows up in our lives is a message from the Creator. This Native American influence on my evolving spirituality has resulted in my being more aware of our need for silence, for meditation, for listening, for being aware of and present to everything that shows up in my life. If there's one thing I would encourage each of us to do on our own spiritual journeys, it would be to adopt a regular practice of silence. Now, there's a plethora of books out there that teach us how to do that. So I encourage you to find one that appeals to you. The two that I've listed, Listening Below the Noise and Women Roaring North, have been very helpful for me, both to trust my intuition, to trust myself, and in learning how to be silent. It's in the silence that the divine speaks to our hearts. It is where we make a home for spirit power. So here is where I deviate a bit from what I had prepared for you, or what I was thinking about even up to last week, because spirit power showed up in my life last week in a very powerful way that is linked to the final book on our list, the one called Tune In. So I'm going to tell you the story. I facilitate a grief group for one of the hospices in our area. And and most of you know my story. You know that I've lost a son, that he died by suicide a little over 16 years ago now. Anyway, there's a family in this group who lost a teenage son and really, really struggled with that loss. But they saw signs of him like everywhere. And finally, they decided to consult a medium. And what the medium told them was phenomenal. And so probably 2 years ago, they told me about this medium. I thought, oh, what's her name? But I didn't write it down. And periodically, this would show up in my life again. They'd say something else about a medium, and what's her name? And I didn't write it down. So a few weeks ago, right before Corona hit, I was facilitating the group again, and they mentioned the medium again, and I thought, well, I'm going to write her name down. So I did. And that night, I had a very powerful dream about my son. He was laying by a swimming pool in a swimsuit. He was probably 13, 14 years old. He had his braces yet. And as I walked by him, I said, "Oh, Matt?" And he said, "Mom?" And I said, "Oh, Matt, I have missed you so much." And he said to me, "You don't need to, just go." And when I woke up and thought about that, I thought, well, if that's not a nudge to go make that appointment with the medium, I don't know what is. So I made the appointment with the medium and went as skeptically as I could possibly be. I sat down in front of her and I said, "I don't want you to ask me any questions because I'm not going to answer anything. I don't want you to be pumping me for information. I don't even know what to think about you, but I'm here." And she said, "I get you. I get that a lot. There are people that will try to learn things about you and try to manipulate you, but I'm not that person. So I'm just going to ask you one thing, two things actually. Are you here to see someone in the spirit world?" I said, "Yes." And she said, "Well, that's good because I think about 5 spirits right now. 4 of them appear to be male and 1 appears to be female. Are you looking for a male or a female?" And I said, "Male." And she said, "Yep, there's one that's looking at me as skeptically as you are, scoping me out. I get the sense that he's 30s, late 20s. I get the sense that he's not your husband. I think he's your son. I think he chose to put himself in the spirit world. And he feels very badly about that because he knows that it hurt you. But he wants you to know that he doesn't want you to be sad. He wants you to know that life is really good for him, that he couldn't ever feel whole or accepted where you are. And even though when he first got to the spirit world, he thought maybe he had made a big mistake because he didn't settle in very well, he's very happy now." Which all sounded like things I really wanted to hear, but you could have said to pretty much anyone. Then she said to me, "He wants you to know he's really happy that you got his tattoo after he died." I have a lot of tattoos, but you can't see them and neither could she because it's winter and they're all covered up. And she said, "He wants you to know that he really appreciated the celebration of his life that you had. Not the funeral, not right after he died, but it was quite a while after. He really liked it. On the 10-year anniversary of his death, we had a celebration of his life and invited people for a concert of his music. He said, I want her to know that I appreciate she said, I'm going to call it a shrine. I don't know what you call it, but upstairs where you have an altar laid out with his picture and then lots of other pictures. And he really likes that you hung that one picture of his behind the chair that you sit in. All these things didn't seem possible to me. That being able to communicate, and I wasn't doing the communicating, but to be able to hear what he was saying. And then she said, do you have any questions for him? And I said, how do I have a relationship with him? And he said, pay attention. Pay attention. I'm all around. You just need to pay attention. And then she said, and he says you should read this book, Tune In, which I'm not sure was him saying that or her saying that. But I am allowing my spirituality to continue to evolve. I'm going to be reading Tune In, seeing what it has to teach me, and weaving it into the spiritual fabric of my life, because what I'm seeing is this is all about spirit and about connection, which is what I have sensed about the divine from way back when. Spirit, connection, relationship, working together. So if any of what I have said, or if I've had to say today resonates with you, I invite you to take a deeper look at the books I've shared. But I know that you are on your own spiritual journey, and you will find what you need, where and when you need it. And I also know that I don't think books teach us so much as put words to what's already here. So I leave you with some things to think about. I hope you, in a minute, give me things to think about as well. I'm asking you to please share what's enlightened and supported you on your spiritual journey as well.
Wow, thank you, Carrie. Thank you so much. As usual, that was amazing. I'm wondering if you would be comfortable sharing the medium's name with us.
Sure, her name is Lori Ann, and she's in, let me see if I can find her, if I can exit my full screen now. She's in Menasha. Unfortunately, she is moving to Sedona, Arizona.
Oh.
So she, let's see, I'm gonna find her here. But she does these, like what we're doing, like through Zoom or any kind of video conferencing. And I think she'd be just as good as, let me see if I can share this screen. In person, or I mean on video, as she was in person. Mm-hmm. Let's see, Zoom, get back here. Where's my meeting? Okay.
While Carrie's looking for that, I just want to mention a couple of things. We'll take a little bit of time for some feedback or questions. We should probably end our service relatively soon. But we will be breaking into small groups so we can discuss Carrie's presentation or whatever we feel the need to discuss or want to discuss. I skipped over, Jim reminded me during Carrie's presentation. And by the way, I wonder if any of you found, as I did, that it was almost easier to concentrate and to pay attention to what Carrie was saying this way than it is in person. I wasn't looking around to see what you all were wearing and how you were reacting. So this was as thankfully Carrie was able to be with us and scheduled to be with us for this first online service of ours, because it was just wonderful. Thanks to her and all of you. I want to mention, we're going to do our closing song now. Please don't disconnect. We're coming back after the closing song. We have some closing words, and when
I was a boy each week, on Sunday we would go to church, pay attention to the priest, and he would read the holy word and consecrate the holy bread, and everyone would kneel and bow. Today the only difference is everything is holy now. Everything is holy now. When I was in Sunday school, we would learn about the time Moses split the sea in two. Jesus made the water wine. And I remember feeling sad. Miracles don't happen still. Now I can't keep track, 'cause everything's a miracle. everything's a miracle. Wine from water is not so small. Even better magic trick. Anything is here at home. So challenging thing becomes not to look for miracles, to finding where there isn't one. When holy water was rare at best, barely wet my fingertips. Now I have to hold my breath, like I'm swimming in a sea of it. It used to be a world half there, heaven's second-rate hand-me-down. But I walk it with a reverent air, 'cause everything is holy now. Read the questioning child's face. Say it's not a testament. That'd be very hard to say. See another new morning come. Say it's not a sacrament. I tell you that it can't be done. This morning outside I stood, saw a little red-winged bird shining like a burning bush, singing like a scripture verse. It made me want to bow my head. I remember when church let out, how things have changed since then. Everything is holy now. It used to be a world half there, heaven's second-rate hand-me-down. But I walk it with a reverent air, 'cause everything is holy now.
Okay, we're back for the closing words.
Thank you, Jim and Peter Mayer, for that lovely music. I will read the closing words and then we'll have a very special shalom. And stay tuned, then Jim will take over again. Our closing words for today. You do not need to know precisely what is happening or exactly where it is all going. What you need is to recognize the possibilities and challenges offered by the present moment and to embrace them with courage, faith, and hope. Eric?
Yeah, if you join with me, please. I'm a little hoarse right now, but please sing with me. Shalom, my friend, shalom, my friend, shalom, shalom. We'll meet again, we'll greet again, shalom, shalom.